got knocked over and got back up into his boat because he had a safety harness on and rolled around on the bottom of the boat for about 4 or 5 days, and then finally got to his EPIRB, which is like an emergency location transmitter that sends out a signal for planes and other everybody has a system that picks that up, and we got the signal, we got the mission. I left, jumped in, and worked on this guy for 4 days, keeping him alive while we were steaming back in on a fishing boat that was taking us. We switched from the sailboat to a fishing boat, and that fishing boat took us into the point where we could get helicopter support, which is 750 miles off the shore, because that's a 15-hour out and back for those guys, and they can't fly longer than that without, think if you couldn't go to the bathroom for 15 hours, that's basically where they were at. They had to get back in. But by the time we got to that point, I had spent time with the guy, myself and the other there's 3 other pararescuemen with me, and we brought him back into health to where we waited for a Coast Guard cutter to pick us up, and they picked us up at 350 miles and took us in, and we dropped him off at the hospital. So I had a couple of those missions, and went to PA school and continued further my medical training.
So how long were you pararescueman for?
13 years.
How many jumps did you go on as a pararescueman?
Well, I don't know how many jumps I did for training or for actual missions.
Okay.
Which one? Training or actual missions?
Actual missions.
Okay, so I've done 2 jump missions out to sea. I've done a couple of helicopter missions in country. Remember I was telling you in northern Iraq, and pulling crew members out, and that's about it for actual. I probably got 700 free falls, probably 160, 170 static line jumps.
What experiences were the most memorable to you from being a pararescueman?
Spending that time out in the ocean with the patient, and basically no one else there besides the other pararescuemen that were with me. And our medical training is good, but it's not doctor or PA or nurse practitioner level. So we basically relied on what we knew at the time and what we could get off the radio, back and forth with the flight surgeon that was on the radio with us. And, also all the deployments. I did so many deployments with those guys, either to Saudi or into Turkey or to Reykjavik, Iceland, pulling the alert up there for rescue. Just so much training, up to Alaska for doing cold weather training, parachuting in just off of Mount McKinley, and out doing a week in the snow, jumping with my skis strapped to my body, free falling with my skis and in my ski boots. That was the kind of experiences I had in pararescue, and that's what I remember the most.
So what did you do after that the sailboat incident?
Well, I went to school. I finished up my PA, and I became a physician assistant. And about that time, just a little bit later, I switched over from pararescue to special forces. I went to the Green Berets, and, which is also an Army Guard unit, and went to their selection program in Fort Bragg, and became the oldest guy in my class. I was 40 years old at the time, and went through the 27-day selection for that, and passed, and was selected to become a Green Beret. And then at that time, they didn't have the slots open yet for me to go to the Q course, which is the qualification course for the Green Berets. So I was offered a job with Triple Canopy, which is a defense contracting group that does security in the combat zone and protects people. And I was picked up as their senior medical officer for the northern part of Iraq, and went to Kirkuk, Iraq for 2000, I signed on with them in November 2003, stayed there until October 2000.
What were your experiences like during the Iraq War?
Say again, please.
What were your experiences like during the Iraq War?
What I was doing during that time was I was working hand in hand with the regular Army and the regular Air Force. I was protecting the Department of State personnel that were on my compound there. I was also running that compound for static security. I had my cohort, I was second in charge. There was the first in charge who ran the mobile security, what they call a PSD unit, a personal security detachment. And he ran that, I ran the static security, and I took care of all the medicine for that 200-man compound, doing family practice, primary care, emergency medicine, and definitive care for 200 people that had nowhere else to go.
Were there any interesting experiences during that deployment?
I did a lot of time in the Green Zone. I did a lot of time in Baghdad itself, moving through Tikrit and through different areas in Iraq as a civilian, dressed in civilian clothing, but trying to blend in with the populace. I drive quite a bit at the time, and I had an up-armored Mercedes that I drive with either the principal in there with us, or it was the lead vehicle. And the person next to me would be wearing a abaya. Abaya is the traditional garb of the women in Iraq. And even though it was a male operative, most of the time the people I worked with in Triple Canopy were either from Delta Force or Special Forces, one or the other. And it was one of the few pararescuemen in the program. It was one of those things that he was a man dressed up as a woman, because as you see this vehicle go by, you know, you think twice, you don't think twice if you see a woman with a veil and a hood covering her face. But even though it was a man, and I wore a big mustache at the time, so I had the Saddam mustache. Because that was very popular at the time. So those are the things I remember about being in Iraq.
So is that when were you part of the U.S. military in Iraq?
I was still a member of the U.S. military at the time. I was at 19th Special Forces Group at the time. And I would go over to 5th Special Forces Group, which were stationed just a couple miles away from us, one weekend a month, and go drill with them. So I'd keep my, but it wasn't drill, it was actual combat. We'd go out and do missions, and it was one of those things I got quite a big experience. But I still kept my enlistment going and kept my people back in the rear happy that I was actually a member of the military, even though I was working as a contractor.
So you were engaged in combat during the Iraq War?
That time in Iraq War, we had a couple IEDs go off. We had one ambush that we had broke, and nothing where I had to do movement to contact. When I was with 5th Special Forces on my drills, we did a couple raids on a couple different houses, but there was no shots fired.
So what was your most notable mission?
Just moving the principal from our compound on what they call the northern oil fields of Iraq, down into Kirkuk itself to the government office, and having an IED go off, having people shooting at us. Us moving off the X, the CAT vehicle, the counterattack vehicle, laying down fire behind us with big machine guns and shoulder-fired rockets, so we could move the principal into a safe place.
And so what did you do after that?
I spent 2 more years with 19th Special Forces. I was there. I was the NCOIC. I was the non-commissioned officer in charge of the training team. Everybody that was getting ready for going to selection where I had gone, they needed to prepare for that. 27-day Special Forces Assessment and Selection Program. I prepared them, and I practiced as a